Well, it seems we need to audit Doge. It seems like Doge has been the least efficient thing with the government. Elon Musk promised $2 trillion in cuts, and now he's saying maybe 150 billion, but that all seems BS as well. I think we need to investigate and look into what the heck Doge was doing. Was it ever about efficiency? I don't think so. Or was it about taking the data of people, getting access to people's private medical information or social security information and other sensitive data? Is that what it's about? And by the way, you don't even have to, take what I'm saying in terms of investigating or auditing Doge. Let's talk about what one of Donald Trump's other top advisors, Steve Bannon, called for this past week at a conference held by Semaphore. He said it needs to be audited. What was Elon Musk actually doing? Watch Steve Bannon say it. Play this clip.
We need to have a very specific accounting of what he found as far as fraud goes and waste. And I mean details. Treasury's got to sign off that. OMB's got to sign off, and every department head. We need to know exactly what it found, because he went from $2 trillion a year to $1 trillion a year to $150 billion next year with nothing this year. None of this makes sense. The cuts you've seen that have been announced are programmatic, whether it's USAID or DOE. That's a totally different thing.
None of it makes sense. I can't believe I'm saying it. At least there, I agree with what Bannon's saying. Remember when they were saying first, Elon Musk is the leader. And then they were saying, no, Amy Gleason's the leader. And it's like who's Kaiser Sose, right? From Usual Suspects. Who's Amy Gleason? Who's this Amy Gleason person leading this? So we want to dig into the facts here at the MeidasTouch Network about what is actually going on. So why don't we speak to a former career staffer at the U.S. Digital Services, someone by the name of Merici Vinton. Merici, you worked at the U.S. Digital Services starting in 2021. You were a former advisor at the IRS in that capacity and Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And what you did at the U.S. Digital Service Department, which became Doge with the stroke of the pen as Donald Trump signed that order, before it became Doge, was actually government efficiency. Let me just brag about you a little bit, because your background was you're an entrepreneur. As an entrepreneur, you had an exit of a successful business that you ran. And then you were thinking about, what's the next chapter in my life? The next chapter was, I want to give back. I'm patriotic. I want to help the United States with all of my business background because I just exited a company. So you go into an area that was similar to your strengths, U.S. Digital Services, and you start leading some of these incredible programs. You co-found the digital team at CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. You lead the tax credit implementation at the U.S. Digital Services, one of the programs that we all know about that Trump's gutting. You led the IRS free direct tax filing system. You were creating efficiency. Then Musk came into town. So take it from there, Merici. Musk comes into town. Trump signs the executive order. You're on the inside. You've since resigned. You're like, I can't be here anymore. But tell us what went down with the stroke of a pen.
We had no idea that was coming. And so we found out the same time everyone else did. That night, so inauguration evening, we received invitations to meet with our new Doge colleagues. We were told everyone was very excited to meet us. And the next day, all 162 USDS employees were brought in for 15-minute interviews with people who would only provide their first names, and asked a series of questions that, felt like a loyalty test. What do you think about Doge? And who's your favorite USDS teammate? Not the most serious of questions, given how complex the work is in government. And then it was rudderless. We didn't know what the interviews were about. We really had no context or leadership, which was both jarring because obviously Doge was up to something as we started to see the USAID takeover, the CFPB takeover, but we couldn't even determine who was going to travel if we could get travel approval. And then on Valentine's Day, 42 of my teammates were fired Valentine's evening while most people were out to dinner or on holiday with their family. And then that next week is when things started to turn around and, Doge took a more active leadership in the USDS team. But we were also grateful that we weren't asked to be a part of the destruction. That's not what brought us to government. We didn't find that particularly efficient. We came into government to design great experiences for people, to simplify people's interactions with government, not to take down federal agencies.
Well, initially when Doge was announced, it was supposed to be this thing outside of government that was going to give advice to Congress. It had nothing to do at all with the United States Digital Service. And then, as you said, there was this mention of this merger to actually make it this official thing. And it seems like they wanted to house it in the executive branch for oversight, or we should say, try to have a lack of oversight claims that Elon Musk was trying to, avoid. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, I didn't sign up for this to be Doge. But you hang in there. You hang in there for a little bit. You talk about this Valentine's Day massacre where all of your friends and colleagues, 40 plus, get fired on Valentine's Day, kind of out of nowhere. Then take us through the next steps. What happens as Doge really asserts itself and then really starts to impact critical government services? I think especially at the IRS. What starts to happen when they assert control?
So I viewed what happened at the IRS as, even though I was Doge, but as a bystander. I'd been on detail. Effectively, the way that the U.S. Digital Service used to work is you would be sent out to agencies. I was on detail on loan to IRS to support the direct file project. And so when Doge arrived, it was kind of a bizarre series of initial conversations. You'd bring people in to do a briefing, to do an introduction to the agency. I'll never forget one of the first conversations. We were kind of in a bit of a brainstorming, and one of the Doge people goes, "So everyone, just imagine there are no laws." And if you've ever met anybody at the IRS, the only thing that they're really passionate about is the law, taxes, and tax law. And it was just this jarring experience of somebody who's like, imagine there are no laws. Like typically you would say, wave a magic wand, or, blue sky thinking. And they just took a really different approach. And from there, it went like they did at several other agencies, which is you ask for control and access over the personnel systems so you can fire people. You ask for access to the data, I'm guessing, to individuals' data, I'm guessing, to make determinations about benefits. And then finally, you ask for access to procurement systems. And that was so that you could cut contracts that you didn't feel, it wasn't based on logic, but that you didn't feel were effective. And when you cut a procurement contract, that's often as Steve Bannon said, that's often a body of work. That is stuff that is being delivered to taxpayers or services across government, or, the IRS. It's making irs.gov more functional, more features for people. And so it wasn't really much of a rhyme or rhythm to how they approached their cuts. And it was not efficient at all.
So USDS, which you took a job for in 2021, which had nothing to do with getting rid of government programs, which was actually about digitization of an outdated federal government, and you wanted to help. You were doing things like building these systems, direct tax pay, tax credit implementation, focusing on things like that. Musk comes in. They start doing loyalty tests. They start firing people. Then they start bringing people like you who don't want to dismantle and destroy. That's not what your skill set is. That's not why you're here. That's not why you're giving back. But you start seeing what this group is doing that's kind of did a hostile takeover of USDS and made it Doge. So now you're almost a bystander observing what's taking place. And now they're out there saying things like, whereas you would be working with IRS, okay, let's do direct file. How do we get this more efficiently? How do we reduce call times? How do we make sure we're increasing our tax revenue? Now these Doge people that Musk brings in are saying, imagine a world where there are no laws. What would you do? And these IRS people are sitting around there saying, huh? What's going on? I got to ask you this question because I've always wanted to know. Amy Gleason, who I'm sure from there. Let me show you what the White House has been saying about Amy Gleason. This is Caroline Leavitt, Donald Trump's press secretary. This is from a few months ago after they were claiming in court, Doge was claiming in court that Musk was actually not leading Doge, but somebody else. And they go, we all know it was Amy Gleason. Here, let's watch this.
Start her job as Doge administrator.
So Amy Gleason has been the Doge administrator for quite some time, I believe several weeks, maybe a month. I'm not actually sure of the specific timeline. She's a career official. She's doing her job as the administrator of this organization. I know everybody's very interested in her name and who she is and what she does. There's a lot of people who work for the federal government. They're just trying to do their jobs, and, that's what she's doing.
Doge staffers told us yesterday that they found out about her being the administrator yesterday. Why is that?
You have to ask them. They're clearly unaware. I don't know.
Well, what's your response to that? First, did you ever know Amy Gleason to be the leader of Doge?
Not until it was announced. No.
So the first time you ever found out that she was either the leader of Doge or U.S. Digital Service, you and others working there, the first time you ever knew was it was announced by the White House in a court filing or somewhere. That's how you found out, oh, Gleason's the boss now, right?
Yeah, she was on vacation. It was a shock to all of us. The prior week, it was clear that there was more involvement from Doge, but nobody had a title, and it wasn't clear to us that she was going to be our, the head of Doge or the U.S. Digital Service. The way I view this and Amy's position is I view it as multiple Doges, like different cells almost. So there's the U.S. Digital Service Doge, USDS Doge. Then there's, I don't know what to call them, like roaming Doge. So they sleep on the floor of GSA and they go to different agencies and ransack them. And then there's also more Doge is now officially inside the organization in an official capacity. So the Bureau of Fiscal Services, the gentleman there, was Doge and is now, I think the assistant secretary is his title, and he oversees a government agency. And so there's different modes here that really kind of show that whatever's the most effective approach is the approach that they'll take.
How worried should American citizens be right now about what Doge is doing to the government, the impact that it's having, whether it's at the IRS, which you have familiarity with, the CFPB, which you have familiarity with, or just in general, based on your experience?
I'm really worried that people don't understand that it's real. I'm from Nebraska, and I remember what it was like thinking DC is a bubble, but this is actually something that's happening in DC and is impacting the country. When I joined the IRS in 2022, all IRS employees could talk about was how they only answered 12% of calls that year because they were under capacity. And then there were huge paper backlogs. Doge has cut that capacity. So I don't know, we went from 12% to 88% the next year, which is heroic. And I don't know what next filing season is going to look like. That's going to impact people across the country as they try to file their taxes. They don't know when their tax refunds are going to come or their Social Security checks are going to come. So those are kind of like the next year worries. I worry long-term about cancer research, medical research. Those grants and the funding of that research is what has made America great and is what has put us at the top of, really thinking about medical research, education grants. And it seems like a lot of that money, the long-term investments, which is what government should be for, right? Not the short-term gains, but the long-term gains, that's gone. And so I also really worry what it's going to look like in a few years when we won't have had those breakthroughs.
So you are on the inside. There's been a lot of talk about Doge. Is there anything that you think that's not being discussed enough that you think about, that you think deserves more attention? I mean, it's rare for our viewers, and we've got millions of subscribers here at the MeidasTouch Network, to actually hear from someone who was there before it was Doge, who was there during the takeover, who saw it, who has intricate knowledge of it, and based on your knowledge of working with the IRS, the CFPB, and you building these systems, you're in a very unique position to just share your wealth of knowledge with the audience. So I often like when I end these interviews just to say, well, what do you want people to know? And there's no time limitation on. I genuinely want you to share your wealth of knowledge with our viewers about what you've experienced, what you want them to know, what people should be thinking about. So let me toss it to you there.
I would say two things. Number one, a lot of the destruction that has been happening across the federal government it seems like a constitutional crisis in the sense that you can try to eliminate or delete a federal agency overnight. And that is something that was set up by Congress and paid for by taxpayers. And I don't understand how Doge has been able to do this legally. And I hope that this is something that there will be accountability for. And that's what we should be demanding, is accountability for the actions that have happened and are continuing to happen. I do think, and I really hope that we can rebuild from this. And that is actually what gives me hope and optimism, is that when we kind of take a step back, and I'll be honest, the status quo was not helping most people. Our institutions were not super responsive to today's problems. And so there's an opportunity to rethink how we do this, but we have to do it the right way. And we have to do it in a way that actually puts people and their needs first, and really understands the mission of government, the mission of what it is that people need and what government's trying to deliver. And that's what I hope we can do, in a few years, if we're given a chance. If people like me that want to come back into government to rebuild are given a chance to do that. I don't think this has been efficient. I actually think it's going to be incredibly expensive to rebuild what's been done.
I think that's very hopeful for our viewers and listeners to hear, though, that I'm sure you speak also with other workers, others who had been fired, others who had resigned as you had resigned, about what happens next. Obviously, this is a catastrophe and it's a mess, but perhaps the fact that we are seeing it now, people understand the importance of actual efficiency, which is what you were doing when you reduced the ways the IRS was not responsive to people to having an 85 to 90% responsive rate. So there's a world where you think the others in a future situation, future non-Musk, non-hostile government takeover situation, are actually ready to come back in the future and help rebuild?
Absolutely. Everyone is devastated by what's happening and wants to come back, and they want to be a part of it. I think there are actually still great people inside that are trying to do the right thing. And I'm so happy that they're able to have an impact and try to push things in directions that are productive and constructive. And so that there is still pockets where, it hasn't been impacted yet by Doge's cuts. And I'm grateful for that. But yeah, everyone, a lot of my colleagues, former colleagues, were really excited to hopefully get the opportunity to come back and frankly to rebuild people's trust, that both, Fed employees who have been, it's been a rough couple months for them to say the least, as well as people, the taxpayers who expect a good government, expect things to be delivered, their social security checks to come on time. And so hopefully we can regain the trust and, things like direct file. So Doge cut direct file, the free tax filing product. And hopefully we can reimagine that and bring it back. That's something that people loved, and we need more projects like that. And we can absolutely do that.
Let me ask you more about that. While I got you, I'm enjoying this interview so much because of the wealth of knowledge that you share. Tell me about that, though. You built the free direct tax file system that was beloved in the nation. People said this is efficient. Musk, Doge cut the free direct file system, one of the most popular things, and you were one of the leads who created that. What's your response to that? What do you want to tell American people about that program?
So direct file was a startup within government, effectively. It was a team of people who were passionate about new feature releases and taking feedback from our users to make the product better. In its first year, direct file, it was just a pilot year, so it was very limited in the number of states. It was 12 states that used direct file last year. And in that first year, 86% of users said direct file helped increase their trust in the IRS. So we have proof that if you do a thing that people love, it actually helps them have higher expectations and expect more from government and trust in their government to do that. So the other thing that we're very proud of is direct file Net Promoter Score is a private sector kind of consumer index of how people love the products that they use and how they rate them. And direct files last year was 74 plus 74, and this year it's plus 82, I believe. Apple's is plus 72. So that is how much people really loved a government product and a government service. One more point, because you gave me the chance to talk about it. There's every tax season, there's a meme of like, why doesn't the IRS, the IRS asks me to do the math and then they throw me in jail when I get it wrong, when they know all the answers. And we started to pre-populate information that the IRS has about you into your tax return. So that way it was more accurate and it took you way less time. I got texts from people who were like, my kid did this in 10 minutes. I mean, the average person, it takes them 9 hours and costs them $160 to do their taxes. And direct file is free and it took a bunch of people 10 minutes to do it. So it's a really great example of government efficiency and something that users love. And Doge didn't see any value in it and ended up killing it. The AP reported they killed it last week.
Merici Vinton, thank you so much for joining us and sharing the wealth of knowledge from being on the inside. Former U.S. Digital Service Doge staffer, Merici Vinton, thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody hit subscribe. Let's get to 5 million subscribers.
Can't get enough Meidas? Check out the Meidas Plus Substack for ad-free articles, reports, podcasts, daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, and more. Sign up for free now at MeidasPlus.com.